Imagine the most decisive and enigmatic moment in history. The publication of a man whose words challenged the reflections of the time and inspired hope, but who was about to face death in a brutal way. At the head of this trial, a powerful man, Pontius Pilate, with the fate of Jesus Christ in his hands. Have you ever stopped to think about what happened to Pilate after that decision? For centuries, records about Pontius Pilate's life after Jesus' crucifixion were filled with mysteries and dark theories. Some say he lived tormented by the weight of his decision, while others believe he suffered a tragic fall, filled with misfortune and sadness. But what really happened to the man who had the last word on the fate of Christ? Would he have suffered the specific consequences of Jesus? Or did the Roman Empire play a role in its decline? This video will take you on a deep dive into the life of Pontius Pilate, bringing historical details, intriguing theories, and surprising events that few know about. We will reveal facts that were described and analyze the weight of the decision that changed the course of history. But before we start exploring the secrets behind Pilate's death, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here you will find content that brings hidden stories to light and answers to questions you may never have thought to ask. And for those who think they know everything about this story, I guarantee what comes next may surprise you. We will understand how Roman influence shaped Pilate's stance, the impact of his decision on the first centuries of Christianity, and, of course, unravel the mysteries surrounding his tragic end. We will see that his life was not the same after the trial, and that the consequences were beyond any expectation. So, if you want to know everything about the mysterious and tragic death of Pontius Pilate after the crucifixion of Jesus, stay until the end, because every detail counts. Pontius Pilate is remembered as the Roman governor who sentenced Jesus Christ to crucifixion, an act that marked not only his career, but also the history of humanity. Although he was a figure of power and influence in his time, Pilate's legacy is shrouded in mystery and controversy. The decision that led to this trial, far from being just a legal act, transformed his life and generated questions about his role in Jesus' crucifixion. Let us now understand how this trial unfolded and how Pilate's life led him to this fateful moment. Pilates was not just any man. He was a Roman on the rise. Coming from a noble family, he had earned the respect of his peers and rose to the position of governor of the Roman province of Judea, where he found himself in a delicate position. His duty was to maintain order in a politically unstable region, where Romans and Jews lived in a constant state of tension. At that time, Palestine was a place where the rebelliousness and fervent faith of the Jewish people of the time often put Roman authority at risk. Pilate faced a double challenge: maintaining peace and satisfying the demands of the Roman Empire, while trying to respect, or at least tolerate, local traditions and leadership. It was in this context of conflicts that Jesus of Nazareth emerged, a preacher who attracted crowds with his messages of love, peace, and a new vision of spirituality. To Jewish leaders, however, he represented a threat. Jesus spoke of a kingdom of God and the power of faith, which challenged the power of both the priestly class and the empire itself. At that moment, Pilate learned of Jesus' arrest and his accusation of blasphemy and treason against the empire. But upon hearing the accusations and questioning Jesus, Pilate did not find the guilt that deserved death. On the contrary, he saw a peaceful man who, in his vision, did not seem to pose any danger. Still, the pressure doesn't just come from your own convictions. The crowd was excited, and the Jewish leaders were determined to obtain relevant information. They insisted that Jesus was a blasphemer and a threat to the Roman government. Pilate found himself faced with a decision that seemed dead-end: condemn a man he considered innocent or face a revolt from the people. As a final attempt to escape this choice, he offered the people the freedom to choose between releasing Jesus or Barabbas, a criminal. In a deafening clamor, the crowd surrounded Barabbas as he projected the crucifixion of Jesus. Upon realizing that he could not control the situation, Pilate resorted to a symbolic act that would go down in history. He washed his hands in front of the crowd in a gesture of exemption from guilt. With this, he hoped to escape the consequences of this decision, placing responsibility in the hands of Jewish leaders and the people themselves. However, This attempt to escape did not prevent the weight that he would carry for the rest of his life. As time passed, Pontius Pilate's name became increasingly associated with infamy. The fame he built from his position of power turned into a legacy of shame and guilt. After the crucifixion of Jesus, the name of Pontius Pilate began to circulate with a confidence deeply marked by his decision. Instead of remembering him as an efficient governor, the people saw him as the man who sealed the fate of an innocent spiritual leader. The weight of this decision, however, was not restricted to his name. It extended to the Roman Empire itself. News of Jesus' crucifixion soon spread, and the impact of this act began to create divisions both in Jerusalem and in other regions of the empire, where Jesus' followers led to the formation of the first Christian communities. As Christianity gained strength, especially among the poorest and most marginalized, the figure of Pilate was increasingly interpreted as a symbol of injustice and abuse of power. The Roman government, which initially ignored Jesus' followers, soon saw that the message of peace and divine justice preached by these new Christians contradicted the imperial system itself. Pilate, who until then had been trying to maintain his position and control over Judea, began to face increasing difficulties with local rebellion and the votes upon his infamous trial. These difficulties managed to undermine his authority and destabilize his government, until eventually he was called back to Rome to account. According to some historical accounts, Emperor Tiberius was not satisfied with the way Pilate had managed the situation in Judea, especially after the crucifixion of Jesus, which was already beginning to be seen as a watershed. For the stability of that region, his fall was swift and dramatic. From a position of power and influence, Pilate fell from grace. After being removed from his position as governor, speculation arose about what had happened to him. The versions about his fate are many and varied, some implications of an almost tragic symbolism. One of the best-known theories is that Pilate, tormented by remorse and the consequences of his decisions, committed suicide. According to this version, he would have been consumed by guilt and the constant vision of the devastating impact of his decision, leading him to a dark end. Other versions state that Pilate, without support or influence, was executed by order of the Roman Empire itself, considered a political state after the crucifixion of Jesus. Some sources indicate that he may have been exiled for a long time, living his last days in isolation, marked by infamy. In either version, Pilate's end was not peaceful, as if a shadow of his decision about Jesus followed him to the end. In Christianity and popular culture, Pilate came to be represented as the man who washed his hands in the face of injustice, a symbol of negligence and lack of responsibility. He appears in books, films, and works of art as the governor who had in his hands the chance to change destiny and chose the path of a mission. His life, his actions, and his death are still remembered as a reflection on the consequences of omission and poorly exercised power. The legacy of Pontius Pilate, to this day, raises questions. Was he just a man connected to situations, or was he complicit in a cruel decision that would echo forever in the history of humanity? For many, Pilate's fate was more than a simple fall. It was the direct result of a choice that haunted him until the end. The figure of Pontius Pilate, over the centuries, went far beyond a simple historical character. In Christianity, it came to be seen as a symbol of injustice and omission. From the first biblical text to historians' reports, Pilate has been portrayed in different ways. As a ruthless man, a leader subject to the system, and in other interpretations, a mere executor of orders. However, most traditions agree that his decision at Jesus' trial carried a weight that went beyond the bounds of ordinary history, becoming a constant reminder of the dangers of unaccountable authority. Interestingly, Pilate is also a central figure in several popular traditions and legends. In some regions, Pilate's spirit is believed to wander like a condemned soul, haunted by the choice to wash his hands of such a significant decision. In certain traditions of Western culture, particularly medieval literature, Pilate was portrayed as someone who encountered eternal torment, a kind of penance for having refused to prevent Jesus' crucifixion. These stories, although not historically confirmed, reflect the psychological and spiritual impact that his figure has had over the centuries. In addition to popular legends, Christian scriptures and the church have kept Pilate's story alive as a moral reminder, where he represents complicit neutrality and the fear of countering popular and political power. His decision became a warning to leaders and authority figures throughout the centuries. He who has the power to influence the destinies of others must also take responsibility for his choices. In several Christian liturgies, his name is considered precisely to remember this responsibility, as he had the chance to free Jesus in his hands, but he preferred to wash his hands and abdicate fair judgment. Over the years, this representation of Pilate continues to appear in literary, artistic, and even cinematographic works. In theater and cinema, he is often portrayed as a man torn between conscience and political duty, while in other productions he appears as an arrogant leader who underestimates the importance of his actions. Whatever the interpretation, the consensus is that Pilate's story goes beyond the limit of an isolated event and becomes a reflection on morality, politics, and justice. In the end, the fate of Pontius Pilate remains a historical unknown, with some sources pointing to exile, others to execution, and others to suicide. But the real question that his story raises is perhaps another. Would he be a victim of the consequences or responsible for his own tragedy? Regardless of which theory is true, what we do know is that the choice he made that morning, in front of a bloodthirsty crowd, defined not only the course of his life, but the course of the religious and cultural history of the West. Pontius Pilate's tragic death, whatever it may be, reminds us that power without conscience is a burden that eventually takes its toll. He lived and died as a complex figure, perhaps tormented, perhaps wronged, but certainly forever marked as the man who held the fate of Christ in his hands and chose neutrality. Pilate's legacy has survived as a warning. There are times when the responsibility of our choices is so great that we cannot let go of them, no matter how hard we try to wash our hands. With the decision to wash his hands of the choice between the life of Jesus and the appeal of the crowd, Pontius Pilate sealed his fate in a tragic way. Since then, his name has remained associated with an act of omission and a symbol of compromised power. The end of his story, however, remains shrouded in mystery, with no conclusive records of how his life ended. This uncertainty allows the figure of Pilate to continue to inspire legends and theories. According to some traditions, Pilate spent his last days haunted by guilt and remorse. The idea of a spirit mourning and lamentation is common in many cultures, and in the case of Pilate, it is especially significant. They say he wandered in incessant thoughts, remembering the trial of Jesus and its consequences for his life and his reward. Many believe that Pilate, tormented by his decision, would have taken his own life, unable to deal with the weight of his choice. In some versions, he would have done this next to a river, washing his hands for the last time, in an act that symbolically echoed that fateful day. Other versions suggest that Pilate was put on trial by the Roman Empire itself. Considered inefficient and viewed with suspicion, he would have been sentenced to death, accused of mismanagement and instability in Judea. There are still reports that he was exiled, condemned to live out his days in complete anonymity and oblivion, far from power and public life. Whatever the truth, what seems unanimous is that its ending was not peaceful. He found no redemption, but a fate that many decided was a just consequence of his choices. The figure of Pilate, in addition to being historical, has become mythical, representing the ruler who avoids taking responsibility when power and justice conflict. For Christians, he represents the one who, having the power to save Jesus, prefers to give in to popular pressure. It symbolizes the neutrality that is omitted and becomes an accomplice. His attempt to wash his hands did not serve to absolve his conscience, as the moral judgment of his decision transcended time and geography. Over the centuries, Pilate's memory continues to be used as an example of an error that goes beyond the boundaries of political judgment and becomes a spiritual and moral lesson. The decision to wash our hands, more than a physical act, has become a powerful symbol for humanity, reminding us that there are choices in life in which neutrality is not an option and ceases to be, in itself, an option. Sentence. Whatever the truth about his end, Pontius Pilate was marked in history as a ruler who had in his hands the power to change destiny, but chose the mission. His story reminds us that true power requires responsibility, and that every decision, especially one of great impact, reverberates far beyond what we can imagine. Pilate's mission remains an eternal warning about the price of neutrality in the face of injustice. Pontius Pilate was forever marked as the one who washed his hands of the decision to crucify Jesus. His attempt to escape responsibility, without facing the consequences of his choices, made him a figure of reflection and warning about the price of omission. Pilate's legacy lives on not only in the historical record, but as a moral symbol, reminding us of the eternal impact some decisions can have. So, if this story made you reflect, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to follow more stories like this. Your support is essential so that we can continue to bring topics like this, which go beyond common knowledge and explore the hidden side of history. And if you found this story interesting, get ready for our next video. Let's dive into another fascinating mystery, full of historical secrets and surprising discoveries that could change the way you view the past. Don't miss this next journey.